Hey, Hawkeye fans, Chad Leistikow, Tyler Tachman, both of the Des Moines Register. Tyler's got a big smile on his face on this Tuesday already. Looks like he's fired up over there. Had basketball media day yesterday. You're in your element, Tyler. And now a regular football Tuesday. We're ready to dive into all the stuff people want to talk about. Receivers leaving the program, quarterback play that's not up to par. Let's get excited.
Yeah, I was gonna say we probably don't really have anything to talk about, right? I don't. Was it even worth having this show? Because it's nothing's really happened the last few days. So
Yeah, it was crazy. I don't know. Like, I don't want to say I was totally caught off guard. I certainly wasn't that Kaleb Brown is leaving the program, but I was a little surprised that it just happened on Monday, and then not long after that, Leshon Williams also taking advantage, I guess, of the 4-game redshirt rule. He can play a sixth year in college because of the COVID year back in 2020. Doesn't count as his redshirt year. And Kaleb Brown, as we've kind of reported, did play 5 games as a true freshman at Ohio State. So that year counted against him. Last year counted against him with the Hawkeyes. So in order to save a year, he also is taking a red shirt. So he will have 2 years of eligibility left at his next school. Those were kind of the breaking news developments on Monday. And we got to discuss them a little bit with Kirk Ferentz today. Just to get his feel on the situation. And I sent you kind of a funny tweet from Patrick Vint, who, Ferentz said, I don't want to talk about players who aren't here. The guy who regularly talks about 1981 and Gordy Bohannon, I believe, was the reference in Patrick's tweet. So it's not the same thing, but it was still kind of amusing. Doesn't want to talk about Kaleb Brown specifically.
yeah, that was I don't know. That's kind of an inside joke that I have, just because he always is like bringing back these stories from like decades ago, and whenever he's like, if you remember back when, and it's like, no, I don't remember back when, but thanks for reminding me. But yeah, I mean, the first thing I think I'd say about this situation is that this is college sports right now. There's just really no guard. There's barely any guardrails to anything. It's the transfer portal, NIL. It's a very much a business that's geared towards immediacy, like making the decision now, not waiting till later. So that's part of it. The other thing I think is like it's important to understand that we don't know what's going on in these guys' lives. Like we don't know what their thought process was. We don't, that kind of struck me because I was a little bit more so leaning toward like, it's just not a great look to leave a program mid-season. Like, I think you can understand much more if you wait till the end of the season. But I was on TikTok and I was watching a video. There was a former North Carolina women's basketball player. She transferred to Oregon this offseason, and she basically explained why she did it. And it was very much so like eye-opening to me of there's things going on in these people's lives that not everyone knows about, and it's important to take that into account. I think at the same time we can say it it's not a great look to leave mid-season, and it's not necessarily something that's going to help the program because it's just more things that Iowa has to juggle when talking to media and stuff and roster management. And then, what if the running back position it's been healthy, but what if, two guys go down and all of a sudden you're looking back like, well, it would be nice to have Leshon Williams right now. And you're maybe having to play like Xavier Williams, a freshman, or, he's suddenly thrown into the fray. So it's just a very layered thing. I know I'm probably going on with a lot of different stuff here, but those are my kind of drawn out thoughts about the whole situation.
Well, I I like what you said there about you never know what's going on with anyone's life, um, what they're dealing with because it's not just about you know the football fit necessarily. That said, Kirk Ferentz, I mean, was pretty dismissive of the departures. While not talking specifically about it, he basically, well, I got to find the quote here. I should have had it up, but in a nutshell, he said, I don't want to sound callous, but you can't really lose what you never had. Kind of the, what do you quote, Mike Tomlin? Um, um, So and those guys weren't playing much this year. So on the field, yes. And I think when he said that, this is me covering Ferentz for a long time. I think he was talking about Kaleb Brown. I don't think he was trying to take any shot at Leshon Williams, who has been a really loyal soldier in the program for 5 years. I think the Kaleb Brown thing probably bugged him a little bit. I think there was a lot of, and you heard that in his answer about Jacob Gill. I asked about, how do two guys that get here in June don't get on your field at all till August? How are they playing by far the most snaps at receiver? And Kaleb Brown's been here 2 years now almost, and he played one snap at Minnesota. And Ferentz got into the details, like being reliable, all those things, working hard, being healthy, like all these things that we know have been knocks from our reporting on Kaleb Brown. Very injury prone. Not always on the practice field, attention to detail lacking. That's what we've heard. Obviously the OWI, I'm sure that does not sit well with Ferentz either, especially the circumstances surrounding that. So you see, I felt like you just saw a coach that was not losing a lot of sleep over that loss in particular.
Yeah, he was. I mean, I would say he was pretty complimentary to Leshon Williams, though. Like, he did spend a little bit more time talking about, what he had done at Iowa. And
So he did talk about it. So he did talk about a player that wasn't here.
he did.
Okay.
He did.
So.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because
just one of them. Yeah.
I think at the beginning of the presser, he was like, I don't want to talk about anyone not in the program. And then he went on to answer some questions. Because
I think he relented on Leshon. He probably caught himself. Yeah. Because I think they've liked Leshon a lot and appreciate what he did. I mean, he bailed them out last year in some ways. He helped them. They wouldn't have won 10 games without him last year.
He was, I would argue he was their best offensive player last season. And especially like the long run he had against Wisconsin. And there was just a lot of times he was one of the few bright spots. But it felt like Kaleb Brown's season was just derailed before it even started. Like you mentioned, with the arrest. So he missed the first game. And then it just, we didn't see those flashes again like we saw near the end of last season when he really started to pick things up. And I think maybe the frustrating thing about this is that it took him a while to get going last season. It was toward the end of the season where we really saw him get comfortable. He didn't get his first catch at Iowa until that Northwestern game, and then the floodgates kind of started to open. And we don't even get a chance to see if that might be the case again this season because he's no longer with the program. So, even though he wasn't a major factor early on, I think there was definitely a lot of people that still held belief that he could be that guy that Iowa needed later in the season. And so now it's just more kind of roster shuffling. I think Kaleb Brown was one that it was more you felt about the future of the wide receiver position was a reason for kind of optimism. And now he's not there anymore.
Well, and you look at the receiver position as a whole, there's a lot of guys that have passed Kaleb Brown, no question. I mean, and they're freshmen. Obviously Reese Vanderzee, a true freshman, starting. I counted up his snaps for my article that just posted. He's played 248. I mean, Reese Vanderzee's plays 248 snaps. Kaleb Brown's played 19. And then you look at Jarrett Bowie and Dayton Howard. Those are two redshirt freshmen. They've been playing second team snaps. I mean, they've been getting 15 to 20 snaps a game as the number twos. And then Caden Weechen's been getting some snaps in 11 personnel. So there's 5 receivers right there ahead of Kaleb Brown in the rotation. And of course, Seth Anderson coming back from injury. I think they're pretty optimistic that he can be a contributor for them. So yeah, it was just a case of, here's the highest rated recruit in program history, and they couldn't find a spot for him in a room that's completely embattled. And so, I think it does raise the point about, do they have a blind spot at receiver? We talked about this at quarterback, Tyler, the other night, kind of in the press box at Ohio State. It's like, they just haven't solved quarterback for a long time. They haven't solved receiver for a long time. Obviously, those two positions go hand in hand. But as I pointed out in my article, and everybody knows this. It's not a big mystery. I mean, Charlie Jones has 21 catches in 2021 at Iowa, and then 110 at Purdue the next year, and is, I mean, like a first-team All-American receiver. I think he was a Blitnikoff finalist. And then Tyrone Tracy Jr. Was the New York Giants' number one running back on Sunday. Rushed for 129 yards, and he had 15 catches for 106 yards his final year at Iowa. So it just seems like it's a matter of Iowa choosing to use these guys in ways that do not highlight their abilities. And that's going to be tough to recruit until further notice.
And they haven't done a lot to like erase skepticism. It's hard, from the outside looking in to trust that decision making, because I think you look at Phil Parker and that's the exact opposite to where the track record that Iowa's defense has had, where it's like if he chooses to start TJ Hall or if he chooses to start Deshaun Lee, there's kind of that built-in trust that this is a guy that has consistently, with the decisions he's made with defense, gotten the results and gotten the production. Whereas the last few seasons in quarterback and wide receiver, those decisions that Iowa's made haven't brought results. So I think it's a lot. Iowa hasn't done much to erase that skepticism and being, doubting the decisions that they're making. And another part, just kind of the landscape of things, is that I think it's fair to, address these guys as a lot of them are professional athletes at this point. The NIL, they're making money, but there's no contracts essentially. So it's like, it's almost as if like guys that were in the NFL, if they could just get up and leave, they weren't binded to a year contract or 3-year contract. They didn't like where they were at, so they could just get up and leave. So that's basically what college sports is right now. It's professional athletes that don't have contracts that can kind of just do whatever they want. And there aren't like guardrails that basically protect a team or protect a player to hold on to them for any really amount of time. And we saw that exact same thing with Caden Proctor. This is nothing new for Iowa because they've dealt with worse situation with Proctor and how quickly that kind of turned. But again, this is just how college sports is going at this point.
Yeah, it was last thing on this, and then we'll get to our second topic. But I laughed out loud because, I'm a track guy. And the question, I think it was from John Steppe that said, after I asked about Kaleb Brown, and then he followed up with thoughts in general about guys transferring at this point in the year with most of the season left to play. He said, it's kind of like Jim Ryan when he broke the barrier in the mile. All of a sudden, within a year, there were a bunch of guys that broke that barrier. So I think he's talking about the 4-minute mile in college.
Oh, yeah. So I didn't even know what he was talking about.
Yeah.
I was like, I have no clue where this is going.
Yeah, I believe Jim Ryan, was the first, I think. Someone out there might be able to, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was the first college runner to break 4 minutes in the mile. And then, breaking 4 minutes now is like piece of cake,
You're basically doing that now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no. Half mile maybe. So that was kind of funny. I laughed at that. But that's what he's saying. Like these guys leaving now with these mid-year. That's kind of what he's talking about. Because we've seen that all over college football. It's not like it's unique to Iowa.
Right.
I got so many text messages and all this stuff in my text group like, oh, is this a day of reckoning for Iowa football? Is this like, what's going on with Ferentz? Like, has he lost the team? And like, I tried to reply to most of them, and I was like, no, I don't think so. Like, this is just the norm. Like, and that'll get it. I mean, that's, I don't see that. I mean, I do not see any evidence of this team being lost, locker room lost. I think it was 2 guys that weren't playing, that didn't really have much of a future playing this year, that want to play somewhere else. I mean, their best opportunity is going to play is to be playing somewhere else. And I guarantee somebody's going to pay Kaleb Brown, a top 100 recruit, to come to their program next year. Right. And I don't think that, I think that's a realistic thing. So he's doing the best for him. And I think Leshon Williams will get an opportunity. It may not be Power 5, but he will be in a college program next year as a 6th-year senior with a chance to play, a lot more football. And it's the opportunity is just not there right now in Iowa's running back room. It's just not.
Yeah, and just if I can add, the sense that I got from talking to several players was I mean, it was respectful to both of those guys. There was nothing malicious said, but it was at the same time, it was, we have to move on. It's not something that you can really dwell on. And I think I'll read what Jamari Harris said, because I thought it was a basically a good representation of the general consensus from the players, which is, we're all a family, and those who left, we wish them the best of luck. To me, they're still family, but the mission hasn't changed. That's to go out and play great, tough, smart, physical Iowa football. And at the end of the day, we know we've got to come out and do that. So I mean, that's basically in a nutshell what I feel like I heard from the players about the situation.
Thank you for that. Moving to our second topic today, that was a kind of a beefy first topic there. It kind of gets into, has he lost the locker room, which is, what is the has been the response from the loss to Ohio State. Certainly, there's a feeling of the sky is falling from certain segments of the fan base. You and I both wrote about the quarterback situation coming out of the Ohio State game. I took a deeper look on DVR Monday at every rep Cade McNamara had, and it really was he did. I noticed what Ferentz was talking about with the progress, the timing of certain things were at a level they haven't been all year in that first half. There was some really nice throws to Reese Vanderzee. Uh, Probably one of his best throws was a 22-yarder to Jacob Gill on third down. I mean, Gill hadn't even turned on his route. McNamara threw it to the spot he needed to, right between two elite defenders, hit the spot for a first down. And then, that pass to Jarrett Bowie that was controversial in the spot. We were both up in the press box. I mean, he threw that ball before Bowie turned around. Bowie, on the other side of that, made a nice play to be there where he was supposed to be, which is something Kaleb Brown didn't do against Minnesota, and which is why he only played one snap, because he didn't get to where he needed to be on a third down play. So that's just kind of the progress you're seeing. But at the same time, Tyler, and I guess this became a quarterback conversation all of a sudden of how they responded. But at the same time, the second half was kind of it was a wreck as far as turnovers go. And the interception, from the reporting I've done, was kind of on him. I wondered if they had a tip ball. Was it Reese Vanderzee held? No, it was Cade making a bad decision. He should have thrown to the other side of the field to Jacob Gill, who had one-on-one coverage. Instead, he threw into a cluttered mess, threw the ball where he shouldn't have thrown it, and took away all of Iowa's momentum and gave it back to Ohio State. So anyway, big picture. What did you hear from the players today?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like they did a good job moving on from everything we heard. I don't know. I maybe feel like this loss, at least from where I stand, it was less devastating than the Iowa State loss, in the sense that, like, it just wasn't as shocking in the way that it unfolded. And uh, I don't know, but at the same time, I still feel like Iowa has so much to prove. Like, we still haven't seen them put together a full game. I feel actually similar going into into the Washington game as I did for Iowa going into the Minnesota game. Like, they gotta kind of prove something. They gotta put it on the field, because I still feel like there's enough kind of doubt about. We still really don't, like, how good is Iowa? Like, I'm not sure that I can answer that 5 games into the season. And maybe if I can answer that, maybe that's an indication that they're not that good of a team. I don't know. I mean, we'll find out, because these next, the remainder of the regular season, there's no more giants like Ohio State. It's all games that are winnable. Iowa could very much win out. They could also lose 3 to 4 more games. So I think the Washington game, especially given that they're coming off of a win against Michigan, it's going to be a strong indication of, like, could they actually run the table and, like, win out for the rest of the season? Or is this a team that is going to end up just being kind of an unforgettable 7-win team that had a lot of hope at the beginning and just didn't pan out?
So for our Wednesday radio show, Tyler, you may have just given us a great idea for our first segment. How good is Iowa? I think that's a good
Yeah,
question
I don't know. I mean,
it's a good conversation to dig into. Maybe
yeah,
a lot of times we do about 20 minutes in that first segment. I think we could do that because there are a lot of things to dig into. There's stuff we've liked, but again, they haven't played a full game yet. I mean, that third quarter against Ohio State was awful. It was kind of like the second quarter against Minnesota. And Ohio State's second half against Iowa was what Iowa did to Minnesota. So it's yeah, you're right. We don't know. So yeah, let's continue that conversation on our Wednesday radio show. I like that idea a lot. Um, as far as yeah, what I heard today, I liked, players aren't going to say, yeah, I don't know, nobody's doing anything right. Practice sucks. You know, but the responses I got were mature, level-headed. I love Jamari Harris's comments today. I could listen to him all day long. He's just so measured, uh, looks at things the right way, and um, he's just basically we just gotta go with a growth mindset and just keep getting better every week. He was like, "How many penalties do we have the first half of the first game? Like 6?" He's like, "How many penalties we've had since then?" And I think it's about 6 total. I don't think they've had hardly maybe it's 7, but they haven't had many penalties at all this year since then. So stuff like that. They're getting better at big plays, but they're not there yet. Deontay Craig, really optimistic. Big picture about the season. We're 3-2. Our goals are still out there. We're 1-1 in the Big Ten. If you go back to, I was just thinking back to my preseason game by game predictions, Tyler. I had Iowa going 9-3. And I had them 3-2 at this point with a loss to Iowa State and a loss to Ohio State. So it's not like the sky is falling, and the players are seeing that.
And another reason you can feel good about where Iowa can go this season is that they have one of the best running backs in the country at this point. And it's like we've talked so much about Cade McNamara, and I do. He was making some throws early on that just I was like this is where you want him to be. But the problem is that if that doesn't lead to points, and I understand that there was a potential with Drew Stevens' field goal that he didn't make, but if those don't lead to points and then you turn it over 3 times, it doesn't really matter how good of throws you are making. So you got to put points on the board. But I don't know how much Cade McNamara is going to need to do the rest of the season. Like maybe at a certain point, I was going to need him to step up, but Iowa isn't going to face another defense like they faced against Ohio State, and that gives reason to believe that Kaleb Johnson can continue to do what he has done to non-Ohio State defenses, which is just absolutely dominate and tear them apart. So Iowa might not need Cade McNamara to do a whole lot the remainder of the season rather than just manage the offense. If Kaleb Johnson were to get hurt, then things might change. But I'm not sure how much Cade McNamara is going to need to be asked to do, because we saw like the Minnesota game, Kaleb Johnson's running like that. You just keep handing him off the ball and he's going to do his own thing. So, it's from a statistical standpoint, Cade McNamara didn't do a whole lot, and Iowa still won pretty comfortably. So that maybe, from my view, I think that's going to be more of the norm of what Iowa might need to do offensively for the remainder of the season.
Well, we'll dig into the Washington matchup in our Wednesday Hawk Central show. This looks like a good team, Tyler. This is a better team than I thought they would be under Jed Fish. I thought they'd be completely rebuilding. They've actually been pretty good, and statistically, they're pretty dangerous. So this is going to be one of the tougher games left on Iowa's schedule. You'd almost like to have one of those, maybe a Northwestern at home, something like maybe even the UCLA game here. But it will be nice to come back to Kinnick. They haven't been here in 4 weeks. So, something that the Ferentz program has always done a really good job of, I don't want to say always, but almost always, is responding to adversity. And so Ferentz is a master at that. It would be, a pretty fitting 200th win for Ferentz if he could get it. I mean, especially if they do it in an impressive fashion. But we'll see. A long way to figure that out. Let's talk about the news of the day, Tyler, before we wrap up, which would be, to me, the Addison Ostrenga injury. It's the first significant offensive injury of the season, actually on either side of the ball, right? I mean, we really haven't seen any starters hurt, so this is the first one. Am I wrong? I think he's the first starter to be sidelined this year.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah.
which is kind of crazy, but it is a big injury because Iowa has gone heavy 12 personnel all season long. Lester has leaned into it. I think correctly he has leaned into it. And, let's be honest, Ostrenga has been a big reason why the running game has worked. They can trot out two tight ends, two receivers, and let those guys block and let Kaleb Johnson cook. So I think it's a pretty significant injury and changes the way Iowa plays on Saturday.
I will say the Abdul Hodge, Iowa's tight ends coach, he seemed very confident about where that room is at, even behind Addison Ostrenga and Luke Lachey. So I feel confident in saying that he probably still feels good about where that room is at, even without Ostrenga. And I think it feels maybe even like a bigger hit just because Luke Lachey hasn't been prolific this season. Like if Luke Lachey was catching the ball at a really high level, and not all of this is his fault because the quarterback play hasn't been exactly where it needs to be, but uh, I think if Luke Lachey was having like an all Big Ten type season, this doesn't feel as big. But I mean, the blocking from it's going to be really important, especially when you talk about defenses throwing the kitchen sink to try to stop Kaleb Johnson. Can Iowa hold its own in the trenches? And the offensive line in non-Ohio State games, I think, has done a really good job in run blocking. But that's just something else now that you have to account for on the interior. Kind of another personnel, another kind of wrinkle as Iowa kind of moves forward.
Yeah, Zach Ortworth, Farron said, would be next man in. I wondered if it would be Hayden Large, who's been kind of that hybrid tight end fullback. Sounds like Ortworth would be next. I know Hayden's been a little bit dinged up, so probably just keep Hayden Large with what he's doing. And Zach Ortworth becomes the guy that, is their second tight end, and maybe a little bit of Johnny Pascuzzi. But yeah, no information on the duration of Ostrenga's injury, but it looked like from what we saw, shoulder, arm. Really don't know the specifics on that at this point, but that's not great, not great for the Hawkeyes. But could they go with more 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver sets? Maybe trying to get some more big plays. I kind of wrote about that today too. I think that's possible. But I also found it interesting that Farron said they're not going to really change who they are. So it's going to be a big Zach Ortworth game, I guess. Sophomore from St. Louis.
Yeah, and I mean, even I don't know where Gavin Hoffman falls in the ranks of tight ends, but he's a freshman, true freshman. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see kind of just, I mean, Iowa's injury or lack of injuries this season has been one of the more encouraging storylines because just at this point last season, Iowa was already pretty much like just really devastated with injuries. And it feels like maybe at least they're reaping maybe the other side of not having to deal with all the injuries that they did last season, at least up to this point. So that's one reason I would say to be optimistic about the team is that it didn't feel like last season, just by a health standpoint, Iowa didn't have a chance to really grow as a unit, as a full team, to be able to have all the guys get better as the team get better as the year goes on. And because you have so far a lot of that core still intact of those key players, the more you play together, the better you're going to get if you're a good team. So you hope that if maybe that continuity, that ability to just be on the field, stay together, continue to grow, maybe Iowa has an opportunity to do that this season that it didn't, just by way of the fact that they're not dealing with as many injuries.
Yeah. Speaking of freshmen, I did ask about true freshman Jalen Watson, who got into the game, his first college action Saturday at Ohio State. Yeah, quite an introduction. He was a second team cornerback the other day instead of TJ Hall, who interestingly is at 4 games. Maybe something to watch there, opposite John Nestor. So Jalen Watson, Kirk Ferentz saying today, he's shown up in practice. He's a hardworking guy. He first surfaced in the special teams drills. His role may increase as we go. I think he's got a good future based on what we've seen. So some good encouraging words about Jalen Watson, who becomes, I guess we've got Reese Dakin and Reese Vanderzee are the other true freshmen that have obviously burned their red shirts by now. Be interesting to see if Watson uses his whole year, or they keep him to 4 games, something to monitor. But he becomes the third real true freshman to watch here.
Yeah, I don't have anything else. I don't have anything else to
Yeah,
add. No, I
yeah,
mean, you feel good about the future of the defensive back room, like with Nestor,
yeah.
Deshaun Lee, Watts. I mean, I think the future of what has been a really good unit for Iowa under Phil Parker. You feel good about the kind of young core that Iowa has.
No, you made up for that. Good
There we
finishing.
go. That
Yeah.
was a good save on my part.
And we
Yeah.
will, you know what? We're going to talk some Iowa men's basketball on our radio show as well on Wednesday. We can't leave the Hawkeye men out of it. Hawkeye women's basketball media day is this coming Thursday. So we'll probably hit that, I don't know, next week's show or something like that. But thanks for joining us this afternoon. We hit a half hour pretty much on the money. That's what we try to do on Tuesdays for you to kind of get you primed for the week ahead. And we'll preview Iowa Washington on Hawk Central tomorrow. For Tyler Tachman, this is Chad Leistikow. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you soon.